Check that out. Turn on the music. All right, we're back. Anyways, so Marion Matthews runs out of bounds. Dumb play, but the dumb plays that I'm referring to more with Matthews, he doesn't really seem to do a very good job of knowing exactly which hole to hit. He made a couple nice, plays on Monday night, which I think the Monday night guys pointed out, where he could have gone one way and went the other. But it always seems like it's a struggle for him to recognize, where there's space. And then, of course, he's occasionally caught down, or he's occasionally pulled down by guys that he seemingly shouldn't be with his ability. That Monday night game against the Texans, there was that screen pass that he ultimately couldn't get, out of the tackle of I forget if it was the nose tackle. I think people were talking about, and I'm sure that led to maybe why he doesn't get the ball in crucial situations. McCoy did give him the ball on that, what was it, 3rd and 9 or 3rd and 9 to 17, the 3rd and long in Tennessee that ultimately you should have passed on. So Matthews, as has been talked about this week, is really playing for his next contract. This is the most that somebody has gotten out of him. When Norv Turner tried to just let him be the bell cow back that he professed Matthews did that he wanted to be, it was a disaster. And Matthews ultimately fumbled, disappointed in a million other ways, and that's why, he ultimately got benched or wasn't trusted, whatever. So we'll see what McCoy can get out of him. They need him. As much as I love Woodhead, obviously there are limitations to what he can do in terms of just being a running back. Gary Brown, who my friend Tom calls the shuffler for his lack of speed. What was their one play on Monday night where they gave it to Brown? And it just, besides Rivers, I can't think of a slower guy on the team, even when there's a giant space in front of him for him to actually get through. I think it was last year, I remember them throwing screens to Brown when they wouldn't trust Matthews or Matthews was out, and there'd be 10 yards and it would just look like 100 to that guy. But they need Matthews obviously tomorrow because Rivers needs a running game. Every running back needs to provide their quarterback with a running game. And when Rivers doesn't have a running game, a lot of these bad habits that he falls into, they become much more apparent. Phillip Rivers' game on Monday night, I guess they called it being a game manager. It was a little bit reminiscent of our last win at Indianapolis in 2010. November, I believe it was Thanksgiving weekend. I remember coming home watching it on a Sunday night. Unfortunately, they then turned around and lost a game that ultimately would have landed them in the playoffs at home against the Raiders. That was the game where, Jesus Christ, was it Michael Bush maybe that just ran all over the Chargers, and then Rivers got sacked a ton of times, and it was a huge loss. And hopefully that won't happen this week. Point being is that when Rivers is a game manager, Rivers is effective. Again, Phillip Rivers still has some, great physical attributes. His running isn't one of them, or his throwing motion. Apparently, his ability to have children is one of them. Zing. But nonetheless, Rivers needs a running game. He can't be back there just throwing off the back foot, allowing himself to be strip sacked, which, for every third down that we need, Rivers to get the ball away and he gets sacked, I think to myself, well, at least, he didn't give the ball up, which he would have years ago. Last year, actually. Or he would have tried to make a ridiculously dangerous pass that would have ended up being an interception. So, besides that, obviously Keenan Allen, Offensive Rookie of the Week. That's a huge story. I'm sure we'll all still remember him in the Raiders hat. I would have preferred that he helped win the Raiders game, but he's been playing great. I get a little concerned when I hear, I think it was on Sirius this week, Pat Croman saying that he was a first-round talent with third-round issues. I don't know at Cal what his issues were, if they were just immaturity, legal stuff. I know I'm thinking way ahead here. I don't want another Vincent Jackson. This guy is obviously talented. I put on Twitter that I love the way that his helmet seems to be almost, Steve Kelso. Is it Steve Kelso? No, I'm sorry. Rich Kelso for the Bills. I was thinking of Michael Kelso, Ashton Kutcher's character from the '70s show, or even the Gazoo helmet that's too big for his head. Nonetheless, he's obviously playing extremely well. Huge catches. Those crossing routes and the ability to hold on to the ball and to get the first down are awesome. Like I said, I wish he'd helped win the Raiders game. Then I probably would dwell a little bit less on his wearing of the Raider hat. But I worry that he's going to become one of those guys that becomes successful that we ultimately can't hold on to, or that we sign to a big deal and ends up having off the field issues. And by off the field issues, I mean maybe, I don't know, like Jackson holding out, maybe being a bit of a selfish player. I know that wide receivers are generally selfish players, but nonetheless, Keenan Allen was huge. Vincent Brown is starting to come on. So, when people say, I wish we had Denario Alexander or Malcolm Floyd, I might say that, well, certainly in the case of Floyd, I don't think these guys will be playing as much. And Alexander, again, I would say these guys are playing better at this point. But, of course, one bad game tomorrow can change all that. So, Antonio Gates, still Antonio Gates in certain plays, still dropping passes that I wish he would catch, but then he'll turn around and catch some passes there's nobody else who can catch. So, and the offensive line was pretty amazing. And when you think about the fact that Robert Mathis had, 9.5 sacks going in, and the Colts had some ridiculous number of sacks, and that this line of, Clary, Dunlap, Troutman, I mean, guys you couldn't pick out of a fucking lineup, are blocking them. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And I gotta say, King Dunlap, a guy who, when I read about him from Eagles fans, just angry posts, I assumed was like our Jeremy Clary, although Jeremy Clary has never been billed as a physical talent. Maybe he was closer to like their Jared Gaither, I don't know. I mean, the guy's played incredibly well in there, and it's definitely shown up when he's not in there. So, kudos to Telesco, I guess, for I don't want to say taking a flyer on the guy, but for signing him when I had no indication that he was capable of this. They played really well. DJ Fluker, again, we all love the body slam. The guy's attitude, apparently he brings an insane amount of energy into the huddle. And, he maybe takes some of the, the crazy, what's the word I'm looking for? The crazy enthusiasm that Rivers almost always probably brings in the huddle, takes it down a notch because Fluker's the one running with it and getting the guys fired up. I'll never understand why Jeremy Clary's got to be the player to lead them out of the tunnel, but that's another story. Lions played great. Nick Novak, special teams player of the week. I don't know that I agreed with the decision to kick a 50-yard field goal. Is that because, I'm a Charger fan and the idea of any long field goal being, kicked makes me crazy? Probably. But, with 4th and 1, I'd like to think we could get a 4th and 1. I had memories of that the Jet playoff loss in 2009 where they, ran it right up it ran up the gut, I'll say, even though I can curse on these things, to put the game away. I think that might have been the more safe call. But, Nick Novak, kicked it through. And I also saw Kevin Acee put something on Twitter about how Novak was the most not clutch, but the most accurate regular season kicker. Again, for all my bashing of Kading, let's remember he kicked 2 kicks that I can think of that were important kicks at the stage of the game. 2004, he kicked a ball in Arrowhead that ended up helping us win that game. The game, remember, Dante Hall was on his way for a touchdown return. Osgood stripped it. He kicked a 2009 field goal against the Bengals at home where we were tied at the time, so we weren't going to lose. And then, yes, he kicked 4 short field goals in the AFC Championship game, all of which were plays that we wish we had touchdowns on. And in 2000, the playoff game against the Colts, he tied it up with a kick, but he was never clutch. He never kicked kicks like I've seen Novak do twice this year, which, the game in Philly, the game on Monday night, I mean, those were kicks that, that's the game, literally the game. And Novak, to his credit, this is the guy who missed the kick, the P-Jug game against the T-Bows again. So, a hell of a job. And the secondary, I mean, obviously a pass rush will solve a lot of secondary problems. They were pretty good. I mean, yes, the Colts dropped some passes, and everybody, of course, will point to that more than what the Chargers did. But, I know Andrew Luck seems to be a real classy guy, and he said that, we made them drop those passes. I mean, we were definitely getting pressure on Luck, and maybe the ball wasn't exactly where he wanted it. Maybe, it's not coming out quite as smoothly as it would be if he's not under duress. The Chargers deserve some credit. I mean, obviously, especially with Derek Cox, I get a little concerned with how many times are we expecting, a Hayward Bay or somebody to drop a pass or a pass to be overthrown, because ultimately, that coverage is going to get burned. But I've been reading a lot about Cox, getting better. He did make the interception to seal the game. I loved how, much like with Richard Marshall, forced fumble, people were the one against Dallas, people were making sure that he went to the ground because, of course, nobody will ever forget that as a Charger fan. Marlon McCree, 114.07. But, hopefully Cox is playing better. So far, he has been abysmal. I understand that some of that is probably being out of position. It's not just that he's getting burned. It's that he's maybe not getting the help he expects. He's not in the space he's supposed to be. I guess. Sorry, another sip of coffee here. I guess, that comes with coming to a new team. You might have seen the Union Tribune piece with Jared Johnson mentioning that he had trouble, obviously, last year. He's been incredibly effective when he's been in there this year. Last year, you couldn't even have, told me where he was on the field. This year, right off the bat, he leads to a deflected pass in the Texans game. So I'm not expecting Cox or waiting next year for him to have that kind of an impact. But I do understand that it's not just what we see as fans. It's not just a guy getting burned. It's a guy that's maybe not getting the safety help he needs, or a guy that isn't where he should be. I don't get the impression that the Chargers put him in a lot of man-to-man coverage necessarily. If that's his skill set, if he's good at covering guys without help or without the scheme calling for him to be in a spot, I'll never understand. I mean, maybe that's with Cromartie. Not that I wish we still had him. It seemed like he was being asked to play zone at times when, that wasn't really what he's good at. Nonetheless, hopefully the secondary will hold up. Look, it's a game we need to win. I'm not even going to look at the big picture. Could they make the playoffs? As I've written at length, I need to believe that because that's what keeps me tuning in. I'll never tune into a game and assume, well, this is for next year. Obviously, there's a point in the season, which has come far too often in the last three, where it's over and I'm just watching out of loyalty, but I need to believe they can make the playoffs. Would it take 9-7? Would it take 10-6 with two teams in the AFC West at 6-0? Is that even a possibility? It's only a possibility if they keep winning. Let's be honest. The years that the Chargers have had the opportunity to make the playoffs, 2010, 2011, and early in the season, we said, well, could they make it? If they went on a run, they always ended up falling on their own sword. If they had beaten the Bengals in 2010, if they hadn't lost that Raider game I mentioned, if they had beaten the Broncos, that game that I mentioned, the year they had Tebow, they probably would have made the playoffs, provided we still might have no Turner and be just hanging on for mediocrity. And hopefully, this new regime will lead us to something better. But it's a game they absolutely have to win to have any chance at talking about playoffs. I don't even want to think about the backlash that me and other people would give them if they lose this game, which again is not to say that the Jaguars are that bad. I think the suggestion would be that the Chargers are that bad or that unpredictable, or in this case, predictable.